Alright guys, so welcome. This is actually a really specific video and it probably won't be up permanently. Uh, I figured that I would go ahead and re-record a specific video for the day that I'm going to be gone instead of just posting the regular video, because the regular video isn't really targeted instruction. This one's going to be targeted at specifically what I want you guys to learn. Okay, so this one here is for my 5th period. Alright, so this is for 5th period and we're going to talk about completing the square. Don't forget to study. Um, I'll have to grade y'all's tests. I haven't graded y'all's tests yet. I have them on me. By the time I finish this video, by the time like midnight tonight, I'll probably have them graded. But any notes about that will come up later. So just make sure that you know the material prior to this. In any case, let's talk about completing the square, okay? And I've already sort of introduced it during class, but I wanted to go ahead and go into detail about it. This is going to be a fairly long video, okay? I'm aiming for about 30 minutes. Alright, but when you complete the square, all you're doing is making an expression into a trinomial perfect square. And in Silver, brilliantly, which doesn't show up that great on camera, we're going to do a little refresher on trinomial perfect squares. Remember that you've got that identifier in the middle, and all you have to do is take the square root of c. Square root of 64 here is 8, and if I do 8 times 2, I should get this middle number, which I do. So the square root of c times 2 should equal 16. Square root of 64 is 8, times 2 is 16. So this all works out. We know it's a trinomial perfect square. You're good. Okay, so we'll move on now. To factor this, we know that it's always going to be x and x plus some number plus some number. Could also be minus some number minus some number. It just depends. But in this case, it's going to be plus 8 because the square root of 64 is 8. Okay, and then you could also write it as x plus 8 squared, which is how we're going to be using it for the majority of this tutorial. Okay, so this is a big thing. If you don't remember trinomial perfect squares, make sure to go back to the Factoring 2017 video, but do that on your own time. Okay? Oh, by the way, before I keep moving on, please be good for your sub today. Like, you know, you guys are great for me, but be even better for your sub today. That way you don't make their lives hard. So just, please, just be good people for this class, all right? And as long as you guys are good and I get a good report, I'll be nice with you guys too, I promise, okay? So just be good for me. Anyway, let's go ahead and talk about completing the square now that we've talked about our trinomial perfect squares, okay? As long as you've got this, you can absolutely handle completing the square because all we're doing is making our expression into a trinomial perfect square. All right, let's go on to the next page. Square root property with factoring. Okay, so these are the two things we're going to combine: trinomial perfect squares, which you just saw on the last page, and square root property. This is not something new to you guys. In fact, you've already done it. I just haven't explicitly told you what it was. So let's go ahead and show you an example on this piece of paper real quickly. Ignore that. Sorry, that's just scratch paper. But let's say I had the square root of 16. Hopefully you guys know that the square root of 16 is 4. But I've also asked you time and time again, I've been like, but it could also be negative 4 times negative 4, right? Which would mean that you actually have two answers, 4 and negative 4. In this case, that means that you have an answer that looks like this. We write it as plus or minus 4. At the beginning of the year, I know I was using this plus or minus thing and it was throwing people off. But technically, whenever I take the square root of something, it has two answers, both the positive version of the answer and the negative version. So in the case of root 16, it would be plus or minus 4. Root 25, hopefully you guys will notice, would be plus or minus, and hopefully you've said it by now, 5. All right, and you do this for all square roots, okay? This could be for anything. The square root of a squared is technically plus or minus a, all right, etc., etc., etc. But that's the square root, that's that plus minus thing. We're going to be playing with this plus or minus idea. That is the square root property that we're using to be able to complete the square, all right? Anyway, now let's talk about square root property with factoring. What you're going to get is a situation where, again, remember my instruction here is solve. It's not factor, okay? Factoring would be different. We're solving this answer, all right? And if you're solving this answer, it's going to be equal to some number. In this case, it's going to be 0, all right? And all you're going to do is first get this x squared alone. Remember, you're solving for x, so you're trying to get x alone. So we'll add 64 to both sides here, okay? And if we add 64 to both sides, we'll get x squared equals 64. That shouldn't be too difficult. We're just solving for x. From here, we need to get rid of the squared. What is the opposite of something squared? That's why we're going to use this in green here. That's square root. Okay, so the square root of something is the opposite of something squared. So to get rid of that squared sign, we're just going to use our square root on both sides. Remember what I do to the left side, I have to do the right side, left side, etc., etc. So basically I have to do the same thing to both sides of my equation. Okay? The square root of x squared is just x. Remember, the squared and the square root cancel out. And the square root of 64 is not just 8, it's going to be plus or minus 8. Okay? That's the most basic of basic as it gets. It's just plus or minus 8. In fact, you already know this because you know that x squared minus 64 factored out is x plus 8, x minus 8. Set them equal to 0 and you'd end up with the same answer. Excuse me. Okay. So that's square root property at its fundamental. Hopefully you're copying this down. I'm going to go ahead and move on. Let's see if I can get all this on one screen. Yes, we can. Okay. So now that all of this is on one screen, you guys are welcome to copy while I'm talking about this. But what you've got here is a trinomial perfect square equals some number. This could be anything. This could be 0. This could be 120. You never really know. It's just going to be something over here. Okay? And then we have to figure out that this is a trinomial perfect square. Again, the square root of 16 is 4 times 2 is 8. So it does work out. We do know this is a trinomial perfect square. Alright, now that we know it's a trinomial perfect square, let's go ahead and factor it. Factoring again is really easy. Square root of x squared, x. Square root of 16, 4. This is a positive 8, so this must be 2 plus 4. So we'll put a plus sign between there. And then remember, it's technically x plus 4 times x plus 4, which I'm writing as x plus 4 squared. The reason for doing this squared instead of x plus 4 times x plus 4 is so that we can do the square root property thing. Okay? There you go again. And again, let your sub know if you guys need this pause so you can copy it down. I don't think I'm moving too quickly with this, but I might be. Alright. So if you're down here and you've factored it out to x plus 4 times x plus 4, or x plus 4 squared, you have to take the square root of both sides. Because we have to get rid of that squared symbol, right? We're trying to get x alone, so we got to get rid of that squared symbol. If we take the square root of both sides, this just becomes whatever's underneath the square root. In this case, x plus 4. This becomes the square root of 120, which you guys have to simplify. Okay? The square root of 120, for those of you that don't remember, give me one sec with my scratch. Here we go. The square root of 120, when you break it down, is 4 times 30. The square root of 4 is 2. That means I just have a 30 that I can't break down any further. Okay. For those of you that don't remember how to simplify radicals, make sure to work together, ask your classmates, and hopefully you guys will be able to get it together. I will go over this again when I get back if need be, but you guys should be good. By now, you should definitely know how to break down a square root. Okay. So it should be 2 root 30 for this, which is why I got plus or minus 2 root 30. All right. From here, your next step would be to subtract 4 from both sides, because remember, we're trying to get x alone. And when I subtract 4 from both sides, I'll get x on the left side and negative 4. Ignore this here that's scratched out. Okay, that's supposed to be scratched out. I just miswrote. But it should be negative 4 plus or minus 2 root 30. All right. And when you do this, technically this could be a decimal answer. If you type in 2 root 30 in your calculator, you'll get some number. It's like 6.9445 or something like that. Is that right? Something like that. In any case, you'll get some kind of number. It's a long decimal, and then you could do negative 4 plus that long decimal, and then negative 4 minus that long decimal, and then you'll have 2 different answers here. One of which will be like 10.9445, and the other one's, I think, 6.9445. If I'm not mistaken. In any case, this can be 2 decimal answers, but this is also a final answer. I would accept this, and in fact, I prefer this answer as opposed to a decimal answer. So try not to give me decimal answers for these. If you have to do decimals, please give me your answer to the 4th decimal place out. Okay? If it's off by 4 decimal places, then I will not give you credit for that. So I highly recommend you get used to just writing it as a radical, because this is an accurate answer. I don't like rounding. Okay? Hopefully that made sense to you guys. Again, you're just factoring. All right, take your square roots, then simplify. Okay. Anyway, that is the square root property with factoring. Let's go ahead and talk about what completing the square really is. Okay. And on my other video, I have it said step by step, but I don't have it written step by step, which is why I wanted to go ahead and re-record this video, because now I can add the steps in here. And in fact, I'm going to add the steps all in blue marker. Okay, so all your steps are going to be added in blue marker. All right. So the first step is I'm going to be given a problem. It could look like anything. There might be a number here, there might not. In this case, in my question, there is not a number here. But we want to get it to be something to complete this square. Remember, to complete the square, I had to find the square root of c, and then I had to double it to be able to get my b. Alright, so I had to do the square root of c, then double it to go ahead and get b. In case that looks unfamiliar to you, that would be an example like this. Square root of 16, so square root of c is 4, times 2 is 8. So I need to figure out what number would fit here. Okay, so what you'll do is divide this by 2, and you will get 8, and then you will square it to figure out what goes here. Okay, so let me go ahead and write down these steps. Let's see, so the original problem I'll go ahead and write in green again. X squared plus 16x equals 6. So step 1 is going to be, and again, I told you guys this is going to be kind of a long video. It's probably going to hit around 30 minutes and whatnot. And the next thing is actually even harder than this. Well, not harder. You guys just won't like it. So, complete the square. That's our step 1. Complete the square. And you do this by, so step 1a is going to be divide b by 2. Okay, your b term is 16, divide that by 2. Alright, so if I do that, 16 divided by 2 is 8. Your step b here, let me see if I can't get this all up. Your step b is going to square your result. Square your result. Okay, so 8 squared is 64. All good? So 8 squared is 64. Now I know that to complete my square, that big blank there, it has to be a 64. So I need to add 64 to both sides. All right, so let me go ahead and step 2, add your result in 1b, result in 1b, to both sides of the equation. Remember, this is an equation, and you guys should have learned this way back in like elementary school. But whatever you do to one side of the equation, both sides of equation, whatever you guys do in one side of the equation must be done to the other side. Okay, so I know that I need a 64 at the end of this equation here. So it's x squared plus 16x, and then I need to add 64. Is equal to, remember, if I did it on the left side, I have to do it on the right side as well, plus 64. And then we're just going to continue this. So complete the square, divide b by 2, square your result, take your result in 1b, and add it to both sides. Oh, sorry. Add your result, yeah, in 1b to both sides of the equation. All right? And then what you're going to do here is you're going to simplify. Over here on the right, this simplifies to 70. So what this simplifies to is x squared plus 16x plus 64 equals 70. From here, it becomes the same exact steps as what we did, where was it? Right here. Okay, so remember, with your square root property, this becomes the rest of it. So this is the completing the square part, because what you're doing is you're missing that third term, or you have a third term that just isn't a perfect square. Like you get, I don't know, 5 here. And 5 clearly is not a perfect square that can help us get 16. That's just not going to happen. Okay, 25 is also possible, but you know that 25, the perfect square, or I'm sorry, the square root of that would be 5, and 5 times 2 is never going to be 16. It's going to be 10. So this is the completing the square part. After this, after you've done these steps, which I guess I could have called this step 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't know. I just thought that these two went hand in hand. But anyway, after you've done this, you're just going back to what you did here. We're going to factor, take our square roots, and then simplify. So I'm going to do these three things with this. All right. All of these pages will be paused at the end of this video, so if you need any of them, you can always just, roll back and whatever and rewind. So let's go ahead and I guess I'll go ahead and write these, but we're going to factor square root, then simplify. So I know that this is actually 3 more steps, but I wanted it all on one page so that you'd have it. So you can call the steps 3, 4, and 5 if you really want to. It's completely up to you. I don't care how you label your steps. But what we're going to do is we're going to factor this. So x squared plus 16x plus 64. Remember, this is a perfect square trinomial. So what is the square root of 64? It is going to be 8. And remember, there's a positive 16, so it must be plus 8 plus 8. If instead I had a negative 16, this would be x minus 8, x minus 8. Okay? And remember, this is equal to 70, and we write this as x plus 8 squared. Oh, sorry. Okay, and then I kind of skipped a step. So I brought down the 70, and what you've got to do now is you've got to take the square root of both sides. All right, square root of both sides. Remember, when you take the square root of something squared, you just end up with whatever your result was. So whatever is underneath that radical, so it's going to stay x plus 8, all right, is equal to, and the square root of 70, if you break down 70, let me go ahead and grab another sheet of paper and show you guys this. But if we try to break down 70, nothing's going to happen. Square root of 70, two numbers go into 70 are 7 and 10. 10 breaks down into 2 and 5. And you'll notice that I don't have any pairs whatsoever, which means that I can't simplify square root of 70. In this case, I'm just going to leave it as square root of 70. But remember, you have a plus or minus. All right? Last step here is get that x alone. Subtract 8 from both sides. X equals negative 8 plus or minus root 70. Okay? And I know that's sloppy. That's why I have it on this page, and it's much neater on this page. All right, so you'll notice exactly what I did. I completed the square, I factored, I took the square root, then I simplified. And then my final answer is down here, which again, you could write as some kind of weird decimal, but please avoid that if you can. I really don't want you guys using calculators to get this into a weird variable. Okay, so that's how to do completing the square. That's an entire problem. So let me go ahead and put steps 1, 2, and 3 back on the screen. So complete the square by dividing by 2, square your result, add your result in 1b to both sides of the equation, factor, square root, and simplify. That is the whole process here. Okay? Hopefully you guys got that. Hopefully that made sense. Feel free if you're confused to go back. If not, hopefully you guys, you can use your phones to watch YouTube videos or whatever else. Please make sure that you're not slacking off. Like, really, guys, please, please, please make sure you're not slacking off. Make the life easy for whoever your teacher is today. Okay? You guys can make my life harder when I get back. All right, so that's completing the square. There's this page as well. And you can go ahead and pause here. I'm going to go ahead and move on. There's going to be one more thing. All right, guys? I promise there will only be another, 10, 15 minutes to this video. Okay? So here it is, completing the square with a non-1 leading coefficient. This is that thing that we've talked about where you have to simplify something where this is not just x squared, it's like 2x squared, 5x squared, 4x squared, something like that. It's going to be a little harder because it is going to have to deal with fractions. You can do this with decimals, but I promise you your life will be much harder if you do it with decimals. So please, and I know that a lot of you guys hate fractions, but I highly recommend you learn how to do them. Completing the square, by the way, is just another way of factoring. So you don't necessarily have to complete the square. You can use regular factoring. You can use quadratic formula, which we're going to go over probably on Friday. You can use synthetic division, etc., etc. There are a lot of different ways to factor. So completing the square is just one more way to factor. I am going to test whether or not you know this strategy, but for the most part, if I ever just put factor and I don't tell you to factor by completing the square or factor by, inspection or factor by quadratic formula, that means you can use whatever strategy you want. All right, but I will at least test this at least one time to make sure that you guys know how to complete the square, even if you never decide to use it again. Okay, so let's talk about how this works. And I honestly think that this is going to be more useful because This shows a situation where that technique we talked about in class doesn't work so well. You end up with decimals that ends up kind of ugly. All right, so here's our problem. 2x squared minus 7x plus 5 equals 0. Your first step is to divide both sides by a. In this case, your a is 2. So remember, if we divide the left side by 2, we have to divide the right side by 2. What's nice about this problem is you have a 0 over here anyway, so it doesn't really matter that much. Okay, so after we divide by 2, what you'll get is x squared minus a fraction, 7 over 2, and then 5 over 2 equals 0. Okay, I know it's weird, but remember, distribute your division to everything. 2x squared divided by 2 is just x squared. Negative 7x divided by 2 is negative 7 over 2x. 5 divided by 2 is positive 5 over 2. Okay, and then equals 0 because 0 over 2 is just 0. Okay, step 1, divide both sides by a. Don't forget to distribute your division. Okay, step 2, subtract c from both sides. So here's our c. We're going to get rid of it, put it over on the other side, and by doing that we subtract it. If this were a negative 5 halves, you would want to add c to both sides. It really just depends on what you need to do to move c over here. In this case, we're going to subtract. Okay? So 5 halves minus 5 halves eliminates it, so we end up with nothing at the end here. Equals, and then 0 minus 5 halves is just negative 5 halves. I know this is probably uncomfortable for people. Feel free to watch this video in your own spare time. If you cannot handle it, don't worry about the bookwork assignment. Well, I'm sorry, not don't worry about the assignment, but don't worry about these kinds of problems in the bookwork assignment. I will go over it more when I'm actually there with you guys. I just wanted to make sure that you were moving ahead of material before I got back. Okay? So anyway, that's step 2. Step 3, let's calculate b over 2 squared. Okay, and I know this is weird because it's a fraction, but you're going to take your b term, in this case negative 7 halves. Negative 7 halves divided by 2 is negative 7 over 4. Okay, negative 7 over 2 divided by 2 is negative 7 over 4. Negative 7 over 4 is, negative 7 over 4 squared is 49 over 16. Okay, the book actually skips this step, which is why I skipped this step too, but let me go ahead and show you guys just in case that was weird for you. So there's a quick review on fractions. This might push me over the 30-minute mark just a little tiny bit. So negative, sorry, I have a pen cap in my, I had a pen cap in my mouth, but let's go ahead and fix that. So negative 7 halves. Remember, we're just taking the b term. We only want the b term. We don't need this x here. Xing out an x with another x doesn't really make any sense, but that's okay. Negative 7 halves. Remember, you are going to do this. You're going to calculate b divided by 2 squared. So let's divide this by 2, which equals 7/4. This is the same as multiplying by 1 over 2. So this is the same as saying negative 7 halves multiplied by 1/2, which just equals negative 7 times 1 is negative 7 over 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, so that's it cut in half, but don't forget we have to square it. So now let's go ahead and square this value. Negative 7 times negative 7 is a positive 49. You guys can't see that. And then 4 times 4 is a positive 16. And that's how I got 49/16 in this step. Okay, I know there's uncomfortable with fractions. All right, guys, do the best you can. Like I said, skip them if they don't make sense for now. We will go back to them. Step 4 is go ahead and add the result of step 3 to both sides. So that thing that you calculated, which in this case is 49/16, add it to both sides. So we're going to add it to the left side, and then we'll add it to the right side. And we'll combine these in a little bit. All right. Your next step is, well, you do have to simplify. Okay. So we're going to factor the left side and simplify the right side. That's your step 5. All right. So we factor the left side. Remember that this is a difference of perfect squares, so you just have to take the square root of c. Square root of 49, 7. Square root of 16, 4. So they're 7 over 4. And remember, they're both going to be minus because this is a minus. 7/4 plus 7/4 is equal to, that's 7/4 times 7/4 will give you this 49 over 16 here. Okay, so if you FOIL this out, you'll notice that it becomes the same thing here. For now, you can just trust me until I get back to show it to you, or you can prove it to yourself by FOILing this. But that is how you factor this ugly, disgusting number. Alright, so remember the 7/4 is just going to be that b over 2 step that you had earlier. Okay, and then over here I simplified by making this, remember your least common denominator is 16, so I had to multiply by 8 over 8, which makes this negative 40 over 16. Negative 40 plus 49 is a 9 over 16. And then we're just going to go ahead and take the square root of 9/16. This is that part that we've already done. Plus or minus the square root of 9, 3, square root of 16 is 4. So plus or minus 3 over 4 equals x minus 7/4 because the square root and that square cancel out. Then you have here your x equals 7/4 plus or minus 3/4. Could we get another answer for this? Absolutely. In fact, I'll go ahead and do that now. I hope you guys can hear me over that. I have my window open, so it got kind of loud. Okay, so let's go ahead and simplify this. I forgot to go ahead and finish this. But this would be 7 over 4 plus 3 over 4, or 7 over 4 minus 3 over 4. Hopefully you guys remember how to add and subtract fractions. So 7 over 4 plus 3 over 4 is just 7 plus 3 is 10 over 4, which we can simplify to 5 over 2. And over here, you've got 7 minus 3, which is just 4 over 4. 4 over 4, and I know that was kind of sloppy, but 4 divided by 4, you guys should be used to it by now. It is equal to 1. Okay? So that is how you would technically have your answers. So your answers would be x equals both 5 over 2 and 1. Alright? For quadratics, you typically end up with two solutions. We've talked about this before. Okay? Because it is a parabola. Alright? I don't know if I'm going to be able to get all this on one page. Probably not. Let me see real quick. Kind of. It's really small and it's kind of weirdly... let me see if I can't get that to be a little less. Well, anyway, hopefully this helps. And like I said, if this last part doesn't make sense, that's okay. We'll talk about it. This is not a big deal. All right. I will make this note on my note for your sub as well, but fifth period should be picking up from just this page. So they need just this page. Okay. So as soon as you guys get done with this, hopefully you guys are being good and being quiet and whatnot. You guys have a book assignment. Okay, so I need you guys to go over to page 200 and... I wish I had written this down. Hold on one sec, guys. So, it will be in the description in this video. So I guess it's not really that big a deal. So you guys can just check the description if you're tired of waiting for me. That said, it'll also be in my notes for the sub as well. But you guys are going to go to, there we go, lesson 4-5, page 260. Okay, so page 260. And I want you guys to start from 8 to 13. All right, so 8 to 13. And then I want you guys to move on to 14 through 25. Okay. The part where it gets really hard and starts having a bunch of decimals is between 20 and 25. And I think like 10 through 13. So 8, 14 through like 20 are all kind of easy. They're the ones you're mostly used to if you're not used to the decimal / fractions thing. For the other answers, you are going to get nasty answers. Again, you can leave your answer in this format. You can have a square root as an answer. Don't have a negative square root. If this were a negative 70, please pull out that I. But you can have this as an answer. That's not a bad answer at all. This is okay. I don't really want a really ugly decimal. Okay, leave it like this, and I can give you credit for that. If it is a simple one where you can just, 7/4 plus 3/4, you can add these and subtract these pretty simply. They're both whole numbers with no variables, no radicals. Go ahead and simplify. I know that that's technically a decimal, but if it's simple enough, simplify as far as you can. Okay, I don't expect decimals, but I do expect you to simplify as far as you can. All right, guys, I think I actually just hit like the 28, 29 minute mark, so I did a pretty good job of timing this one. Best of luck. Again, work together, please, guys. Work together and try and get each other some help. So I'm going to go ahead and just spend this last minute of this video going over every page again. That way you guys can pause wherever you need to. Okay, so let's see. Sorry, had to get them back in order after I've thrown them all out of whack. But there's that first page, completing the square. It's just that intro page. All right, feel free to pause here. I'm going to go ahead and move on to page 2 now. Square root property with factoring, that's that whole page. Feel free to pause here. And this is just that square root property. Remember, we're mixing completing the square and square root property. So this is the second half where you find the answer. Okay? And then here is the first half of what you do when you are completing the square. So hopefully you guys paused here. I'm going to go and flip pages. Completing the square here. This is how you do it. Here are the steps in case you need that step by step. Okay? So here's that entire problem broken down step by step. You can feel free to pause here or feel free to pause here. Okay? And then the very last page is completing the square with non-one leading coefficients. These problems we can use that other strategy for, but it's a lot harder because it doesn't work out. So if they turn out to be ugly non-whole numbers, then this probably would be the strategy to go. That said, I honestly don't like completing the square. I use quadratic formula if I have to complete the square with really ugly numbers, just because I think quadratic formula is just as slow as this, but I know it'll always be right. All right, guys. Please be good. Please work on your bookwork. Please be awesome. I will try to come visit if I can. All right, guys, have a wonderful day, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye.